Hi there, this is Joel Kennedy with Kennedy Violins. Today's video is about what violin strings you should buy. Now, I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you're probably not a professional violinist, right? So I'm gonna just keep this video very simple. I'm just gonna talk about the different types of strings that there are and what they're usually used for and who they're most appropriate for. Now, first of all, as far as the types of strings, they're usually defined by what's on the inside or their core material, right? So you have basically three different types of strings. You have steel core strings, you have synthetic core strings, so usually some kind of synthetic material like nylon, and then you have gut strings. But I'm not going to talk about gut strings in this video because that's kind of a niche product for very select few kinds of players. So we're just going to focus on steel core and synthetic core strings. Now, steel core strings tend to be more suitable to beginner to intermediate players. You generally won't see a lot of professionals playing on steel core strings for a variety of reasons, unless they're like fiddle players or something like that. So now I'm just going to go over some of the characteristics of the steel core strings. Okay, so there's basically four main characteristics of steel core strings, so I'll just mention those really quickly. Now, the first one would be that they tend to be easier to play. That's one reason why they are usually more suitable for a beginner to intermediate player. They're easier to play because they are higher tension generally, and so that higher tension makes them more responsive, so it's just easier to get the string to speak when you attack it, with the bow. Okay, number two is steel core strings tend to be more durable than synthetic core strings, probably just because of, the material doesn't stretch as much, and you're going to have to replace the strings not as often, so they're just going to last longer. Okay, so the third characteristic of steel core strings is that they tend to stay in tune a lot longer than a synthetic core string. So this is especially important if you are a beginner to intermediate player, because if your string is constantly going out of tune, or you're not comfortable with tuning your violin yourself and you're constantly having to tune the instrument, well, that's not something that you're going to want to do. So if you're more of a professional level, then it's not a big deal to tune your violin all the time. But the steel core, because they stretch less than a synthetic core string, they're going to have a tendency to stay in tune a lot longer, and it's going to be a lot easier for you as a player to manage. Okay, so the fourth main characteristic of a steel core string is that they tend to not sound as good as a synthetic core string, right? Because you might be wondering, well, gosh, if you got all of these benefits of a steel core string, why doesn't everybody play on them? Well, the simple reason is because even though there's a lot of benefits to a steel core string, they generally just don't produce as warm of sound as a synthetic core string. Because a synthetic core string tends to replicate, the old school, gut strings, which have they produce a very complex, the sounds can be sweeter and warmer, and but they're harder to play. But if you're a professional and you make your living by the quality of your sound, well, and you have the skill to be able to manipulate this more difficult to play string, then you're probably going to choose a synthetic core over a steel core string. Okay, so some examples of steel core strings would be from the D'Addario company. That's an American company. They produce the Preludes and the Helicores, and then the Tom Stick company produces the Spiral Core, and then the Parastro company produces the Chrome Core. But honestly, just about everybody just buys a D'Addario string. As far as I know, they're probably easily the most popular steel core string. We literally put thousands and thousands and thousands of them a year on our violins, the Preludes actually. So they're inexpensive, they're super durable, and it's just a really great string for the money. Helicores are very similar to Preludes, but they produce a bigger sound, a warmer sound. They're more expensive as well, but they're also super tough, really durable. They stay in tune. They're just a great string, especially for viola. Maybe for violin, they might be a bit much unless you're a fiddler player or something like that, but they're a very popular string for a viola. Okay, so that pretty much covers it. Now, as far as the synthetic core strings, there are a million different types of strings that you can buy. And I'll mention really quickly some of the more popular ones to kind of narrow it down if that's helpful to you. But again, advanced players will almost always choose some kind of string that has a synthetic core, and there are a million different options out there. But I'd only recommend synthetic core strings for 3 reasons. Number 1 is that you're a professional player and you really want that quality of sound. Number 2, you're very comfortable with tuning your instrument, so it's not an issue to you to have to tune your violin a lot often. And number 3, they're going to be more expensive and they're not going to be as durable. So if you don't mind the extra cost and the fact that you're going to have to switch your strings out more often, then that might be the way to go. Now, some examples of some synthetic core strings would be from the D'Addario company again. They have the Pro Art, and then they have the Zyx. From the Parastro company, they have strings like the Eva Perazzis, Obligatos. From the Thomas Stick company, they have Infeld, Peter Infeld. Of course, Dominants have been around for like 45 years or something like that. So there's a lot of different types of strings that you can get. And they have a huge variety of exterior coatings too, like tungsten, silver, nickel, aluminum, all kinds of different stuff. And they all produce a slightly different sound, and they all have different performance characteristics. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to subscribe and hit that little alert bell. I'm creating content all the time, so you'll get alerted. And if you like this content, I'm going to keep on producing it. So in conclusion, I would say that if you want to try a synthetic core string, I would advise you to do it as inexpensively as possible, to see how you like it. Right? So let's say you're an intermediate player, you're fairly comfortable with tuning your violin. Okay, so you could go to the D'Addario company and you could try out their Pro Art or their Zyx strings. They're fairly inexpensive in comparison to some of the other manufacturers, and they're pretty stable. And and so if you try them out and you like it, and you're pretty comfortable with the violin, and you like the sound of the strings over your preludes or helichords or whatever you're using before, well then maybe you could put yourself out there and try some of the really expensive ones from the Parastro company or the Thomas Stick company or something like that. But that would be my suggestion. If you want to try some out, try some from the D'Addario company, and it's a really good way to kind of get your feet wet. So that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you have any questions or anything like that, of course you can contact Kennedy Violins anytime, and I hope you guys all have a great day.